Okay, welcome back to this fall edition, the very first this fall, of Applied AI Lunch Talks. I see a question in the room, no? Okay, so welcome to all of you who've made the effort to come up here to Skylab. The bonus is going to be that you can network and ask extra questions to our speakers afterwards. And those of you joining us online, welcome to you too. We have a new record of registrants. We are about 80 people, I think, registered. We'll see how many actually joins. And to the people who didn't join, you can watch it on demand afterwards. So even if you didn't make it up here to Skylab, you still have the option to ask questions in the chat. We're going to take those questions afterwards. So please write in the chat when things come up for you, things you're curious to have more elaboration on, or things that just puzzles you. So my name is Camilla Nørgaard Jensen. I'm an innovation manager here at DTU Skylab. I also work with the Pioneer Center for AI. And together with AI Denmark, those three entities, I have collaborated about bringing all of these speakers to you to learn more about applied AI. So without much further ado, I'd say one of the reasons why I chose the speakers for today is that over the summer, when I've talked to people about AI, and especially how people apply AI, they're like hesitant to move forward because they don't know what the regulations are going to be. So I have a speaker to you that is an expert in the Applied AI Act, Léonard van Rompaey. I'm not sure if I'm butchering his name, but he'll pronounce it correctly in a minute. And then afterwards, we have a visit from Novozymes. Peter Mørk Groth is going to talk about, together with Sarah Mesquita, who graciously jumped in as a substitute for Victoria Payne, who fell ill, unfortunately. So Sarah jumped in with not much preparation at all. We're really grateful for that. And they're going to talk about how to make sense of the data haystack. So you have something to look forward to. And I'd like to welcome our first speaker on the stage. Please welcome Léonard.
Yes, now I got it.
You might want this one.
Yeah.
So just forward a few.
Hello, everyone. I'm Léonard van Rompaey. I think you did a great job at pronouncing my name, so that was good. Thank you so much for having me here today. And I'm here to talk about the AI Act. And I just want to start off by saying that I love the AI Act, and I love that we're regulating artificial intelligence. And the reason is because it gives me an excuse to work with you. And it gives me an excuse to work on things that are much more interesting than the law itself. So thanks, I'm very thankful for that. So just a couple of disclaimers to begin. Of course, you know, I'm a lawyer, so I gotta make those. The first one is that the AI Act is not out yet. Hopefully, it will come out in December, when the Council and the European Parliament agree on a final version. But right now, we're working on a draft. The second thing is that this is not legal advice. I'm talking about research today. And the last thing is that my slides were generated by ChatGPT, based on my talking points, but still. So it's the first time I tried this out, so we'll see how it pans out. But yeah, essentially what I'm going to talk about today, I'm going to give you an overview of the AI Act. I'm not necessarily going to talk about like the requirements in terms of compliance that weigh on people building machine learning systems, for instance. But I will talk on the elements where you will need the help of a lawyer. Because one of the things that this piece of regulation brings to the table is a much greater need for multidisciplinarity. Both from the lawyer's perspective, we need to learn to collaborate with other professionals much better than we do. And also because it is becoming quite necessary for developers to include people from other fields, specifically at the early stages of their design projects, to make sure that they don't end up building another Cambridge Analytica or other systems like that. Yes. And then, yeah, context and relevance. I don't know why ChatGPT made that point, but we'll figure it out. It's a very interesting piece of regulation because for me it's a completely new paradigm of enforcement. In a way, it's a little bit like the GDPR because we have like European institutions that are trying to be really proactive about regulating technology, but at the same time, it's quite different from the GDPR because the GDPR, you know, you do your stuff, you collect your data, you use it, whatever, and then if you haven't done the compliance requirements, you can be sanctioned. Whereas the AI Act is based on the requirement to produce CE marking, marking of conformité européenne. So that's essentially a stamp that you self-certify your product saying that my product complies to the European Union regulation, AI Act, and which other one needs to apply to your product. So in that sense, even before you can actually put your product on the market or use it internally in your organization, you need to come up with this technical documentation that describes all the compliance steps that you took and that says that we did it, we did the good work, and you don't necessarily get controlled on that on the spot. For some specific technologies, yes, you need like an approval from a specific organization before you can even you can't do the CE marking yourself for some specific technologies, I'll talk about that. But for most of them, it's just like self-certification. So, and then potentially further down the line, some kind of Danish organization checks out your technical documentation and says, "Wait a minute, you didn't do the work there," and then comes the sanctions. But the compliance work happens really at the beginning, even before you can put your product on the market. And I find that interesting because it's there's been a lot of resistance with complying to GDPR, but with AI Act, I think it's going to be much more necessary to put in the effort from the beginning. So another thing that I like about this regulation is that it's something to note, maybe, is that it's a market regulation. It's not a human rights instrument, which the GDPR kind of is, protects individuals' privacy. But the AI Act is really here to create a base standing ground for all technology developers in the European Union, and for those that want to export their products to our market, to start from this baseline. It has European values, it has mentions that are relevant for human rights and fundamental rights, but it's not the heart of the piece. Another interesting thing about it is that it's the first piece of regulation, to my knowledge, that requires producers to document their self-critical insight on their product. It's a substantive aspect of the compliance product, the technical documentation, where you essentially, it's the heart of the regulation, really. You have your product, and once you've done everything, you put it all down in writing. And in this document, there are some specific elements where you need to showcase a certain degree of self-criticism, of critical insight, and of saying okay, we couldn't get to the perfect level of safety on those parameters, or we can't really deal with those elements of discrimination, but we are aware of it, and we're doing our best. And that's what's required of you. It's not necessarily to meet all the requirements at the perfect level, but it's an effort in kind of open chest approach to regulation, which I find interesting. I've never seen regulation in any field requiring this of producers before. And then there's the multidisciplinary approach. Like I said, it becomes much more necessary to collaborate with people from other disciplines, and that could be lawyers. But that could also be people working in diversity and integration studies, or in gender studies, or in sociology of racism, for instance, if you're dealing with a product that could have some kind of discriminatory output in its functioning. So it's also interesting because it's heavily reliant on private governance, this tool. Private governance is when the industry by itself comes up with the fine-tuning of the rules that apply. And I'm pretty sure you're familiar with industrial standards. Industrial standards is a big part of private governance. If you've had the curiosity of checking out the AI Act and checking out specifically the chapter on the compliance requirements, it says stuff like you need to have a database free of error. What does that mean? What does that mean if you're doing a medical product or product in construction, or if you're working in something that's like space, whatever, you name it? It's completely senseless by itself. And that's because the AI Act by itself isn't sufficient to do the compliance work. What they did is essentially they said, okay, we have those like broader objectives that we want technology to meet in order to be marketed on in the European Union, but we're actually leaving the fine-tuning of details to institutions like IEEE, ISO, CENELEC, and so on, which come up with industrial standards that refine and reinterpret those specific legal requirements into industrial standards that specify, okay, if you're working in the medical field with this type of application and this type of technology, this is how you comply to those requirements. So a big part of the compliance work is going to be for you to figure out what those industrial standards are, and they're rolling out as we speak, and making sure that you follow their steps in order to do the compliance work. And on some of them, on some of other aspects, I think that they have like a more legal feel to it, and those are the ones where you'll need a lawyer's help, and it's like interpreting in terms of okay, I'll talk a bit more about this later, actually. So just to talk a little bit about multidisciplinary. So this is results from So the process is this. The Commission came up, well, when the Act comes out, there's a certain number of substantive legal requirements in terms of data curation, safety protocols, and so on. Then organizations like IEEE, ISO, they look at those and they create committees to figure out in various specific sectors, okay, how do we comply with those requirements? Those different subcommittees come up with suggestions that are then adopted by those institutions and turned into standards. Then the European Commission, through organizations like CEN or CENELEC, looks at those propositions from IEEE or ISO and thinks, okay, those are pretty nice, we want them in European law. And then they mandate CENELEC or CEN to come up with a European version. So essentially, they contact and start a collaboration with IEEE, ISO, and they come up with the final industrial standard. And once it's made by CENELEC, it goes back to the Commission, and the Commission publishes it in the official journal, saying this is the official European industrial standard for complying to this in that specific context. Is that clearer? It's pretty long, but they started as soon as the draft came out. So there's actually quite a few standards that are ready to be used when the Act comes out.
So let's keep the questions for after the talk, so you get through your talk. We only have 20 minutes for the talk, then we'll do 10 minutes of Q&A, and I will pass the mic around so that the people joining online, that they can also hear the questions.
So, yeah, this is results from a research I did. I interviewed roboticists in Fun, and I know that it's not exactly the same field as machine learning, but I think it does help understand the engineering mindset. So some of the things we figured out is that roboticists think in those terms. First, the most important part is the economy. Can we sell that product? Then the functionality, is it going to be attractive to buy? And then safety concerns. Like, is it going to be safe to use? And then finally, as a subset element, roboticists consider law as an aspect of safety. Just to put some context in how the people I interviewed think. And what I observed is that they tend to push responsibility for the product down the value chain. So when building, for example, those like mobile industrial robot platforms, it can't do much by itself, right? So what happens is that you have those other producers that come up with tools that go on it to do whatever, carry pallets. And then finally you have the integrator that assembles it and makes sure it works for the specific field in which it will be used, for example, like meat packing industry. And what happens is that Mayer says, as soon as you put those weird tools on top of our platform, we're not responsible for anything. Which is a bit curious from a legal perspective. And we can talk a bit down the line, but what this matters from the perspective of the AI Act is because I suspect that the compliance burden might be pushed down the value chain of a product. So if you're building some kind of software that does some visual recognition in I don't know, agricultural setting, you might be tempted to say like, our product is not used for anything, you know, by itself. It can't do anything, so we're not responsible for the compliance or the defects that come up with it and pushing it down. Yeah, and what that shows is that it's just to highlight the understanding of law from that specific crowd. And a last thing is that there's actually no common understanding of the legal value in industrial standards among the different people I organize. So even people who work on a daily basis with industrial standards, can someone close the door, please? They don't have like a common understanding of what is their legal value. What do you do with those? What is it like? Is it proof? Is it something we just do because it's good for the market? What is it, you know? Yeah. And lawyers, we're not terribly good at working together with engineers so far, unfortunately. In part because we don't have the same definitions for technology. Like we put AI, robotics, expert systems, all of this, you know, it's all in the same basket to us. It makes sense from our perspective because what matters to us is like the final actions made by a product or the kind of responsibility that come with it if it fails. So that makes a difficult conversation when you have a lawyer and an engineer in the same room. Also, we don't talk tech much. Lawyers don't know how to code. They're completely clueless about most aspects of the technology. And finally, we're very good at saying no. So if you come up to a lawyer with a kind of market-ready prototype, and then they'll say like, no, this is illegal, this is illegal, this is illegal. And then if you take us at the beginning of the development process and you ask them, okay, is what we're going to do legal? And they'll be like, oh, it depends, you know? It really depends on a lot of factors. So that's not a really good like kind of mindset to work together. And at the law faculty with my colleagues, we're working on this. We're trying to have a more like yes and approach. And this is important because like I illustrated before, the legal, the help of a lawyer becomes necessary at a much earlier stage in the development of the product. Because the nature of the technology does that if you wait until the last moment to ask a lawyer to kind of vet the product and they say, no, it's illegal, then you have to start like everything over. Okay, I don't have much time, so I'll try to be brief. Yeah, the AI Act, just to give you a bit of context about the requirements, it applies to machine learning, expert systems. They also mention Bayesian and statistical systems. But they don't make a difference between like physical embodied systems, robots, or purely software products. There's a first category of prohibited practices because of the risk for fundamental rights, and that's going to be typically like the use of mass facial recognition used by law enforcement. That should be forbidden. And then there's regulated high risk. So that's like systems, like for example, biometric identification in critical infrastructure systems in critical infrastructure. There's a whole list. You can check it out. And those products need to comply with the Title III, Chapter 2 of the AI Act. So, like all the requirements, I'll gloss over because they're very technical, and I can't necessarily say much about those. And then there's a third category of lower risk products. And those are not concerned by the AI Act. You're encouraged to follow the kind of compliance steps for the development of the product regardless, but there won't be fines if you don't. Essentially, that's what it means. And there's finally like a last category is a transparency requirement if you develop, if you use bots or develop deepfake content, then it has to be obvious that this has been generated, the content has been generated by a machine. Yeah. In terms of the specific like compliance requirements, there's this massive chapter in the AI Act, which is the heart of the compliance requirements about developing a risk management system. And in there, you have to showcase that you have identified fundamental risks and the management measures you have put into place in order to make sure you identify those fundamental risks that the product creates when it's used. For example, if you're developing some kind of system that helps do credit scoring for a bank, then there's like a host of issues that come up with like discrimination in terms of gender, in terms of race, and so on, which need to be taken into account to mitigate the effects of those discriminations. Yeah. There's also the second part of the compliance requirements is to build a quality management system, which I think most companies developing products for the market are used with. But you need to be a bit tighter on those. So a big part of the compliance requirement, like I was saying at the beginning, is just like to have this kind of open chest. But in order to showcase your weaknesses, you need to make sure you can identify them to begin with, right? And this is where the requirements on the quality management system comes into place, because you need to have set up like a structure in the company, in a reiterative design process that includes people from other disciplines and so on, in order to identify the various fundamental rights or safety issues that could be generated by the system. Yeah. And all of this, transparency, no, okay, I'll skip this. I'll skip that. Yeah. And this is where it all ends up, the technical documentation. This document does not need to be made public. But as soon as you want to do the CE marking, you need to send it to the relevant authority. And the things I like about it, it says that there's an element, like in Article 2, it says it needs to include the key design choices, including the rationale and assumptions made. The decisions about any possible trade-offs made regarding the technical solutions, something. Like just mentioning, you have to mention the trade-offs you made for your product. Like that's, to me, it seems like completely, that's very new for any company to have to do this, to show, okay, yeah, we had to make those trade-offs in terms of safety. We couldn't meet those objectives. So I feel like this act is kind of bringing a new philosophy, a new like spirit in compliance, in the development of technology, where there has to be like a more kind of conscious approach, a more honest approach to this. It's I find it really interesting. But that's it for me today. And I think that I would like to hear, like, what do you think about this aspect of collaborating with lawyers? What is scary about working with us? And how do you think that there's things that the training of engineers could change in order to make it easier for you to collaborate with lawyers, but also potentially with sociologists, with people working in gender studies, and so on and so forth? Thank you for your time. And yeah, that's me.
Thank you so much. Let's see if we have any questions in the audience. Otherwise, I have a few to kick us off. Of course, there's questions.
Great. So maybe going back a bit to the previous one. So you gave the examples of IEEE, ISO, and so on. And then you gave the example of the credit scoring system for bank. And I mean, is there any equivalent of IEEE for banks?
In the banking industry?
Systems, or what is the process there? I mean,
I know that they have. I mean, they use industrial standards, from what I understand. I'm not an expert in banking industry, unfortunately, but I'm pretty sure that ISO makes standards that apply for banking and management. Or, I mean, it's such a highly regulated environment, finance, that even if there aren't industrial standards, there will be like national regulations, for example, that will take the step in interpreting those requirements for the banks when they develop those systems. But I don't know if maybe IEEE makes standards specifically for developing systems in the finance industry. I would not be surprised.
Okay, thanks.
And we have time for a couple more questions. You have one?
Yeah, my question is, do you collaborate with the private sector, or do you plan to do so? Because I think, of course, they have legal teams, but sometimes they are not equipped with the expertise in AI or the specific topic.
Yeah, I've been trying to.
Okay.
I've been trying to, but I think that until the final act is actually published, and then there's like a 2 years adaptation time, the companies are very cold to the idea of making any kind of new, or more precisely, they don't want to pay for it at this stage.
Right.
But yeah, I've worked with, I've done some pro bono work with startups, for instance. I'm also starting collaborations in the research, like advisory roles for people developing like industrial research programs and so on. And they're super interested, and they can see like, oh my God, this is going to be so big, and we missed the GDPR train. We should not miss the AI Act. But then they don't want to hire me for some reason. So I don't know. But it was the same with the GDPR, really. You know, it came out in 2016, and then you had to wait until 2020, 4 years after, for companies to really start the compliance burden for that specific piece of regulation. So it's a bit slow.
So I have a question. Do you think that this AI Act is going to be limiting the development of new AI startups and products and technologies in Europe, or actually maybe even promote it? Because it seems like it has a kind of collaborative element in it. What's your take on that?
So the thing is that the interpretation for those requirements is very fluid. I hope that came across. It's like that it's not hard, you know, it's not hard requirements. It's not like, I think that as long as you can showcase that you've actually put time, effort, question yourself in order to comply, then it shouldn't be too big. Like, of course, if you're a really big company like Maersk, developing a system for their own use, you're gonna have to do a lot more work if it falls in that scope. But like for startups, the legal burden is gonna be pretty low. It just needs to be thought of from the beginning. That's the main requirements. Like there needs to be some kind of consideration for the legal elements, even without a lawyer, from the beginning. I would say that's the requirement. So I'm not too concerned for startups. And also, I actually see this act very positively from a competition perspective, because the European Union isn't exactly winning at AI at the moment. But you can almost see this piece of regulation as a very subtle protectionist measure. Because the companies that will want to market and sell their products within the European Union will have to comply with those requirements as well. So when Facebook wants to launch some kind of new service in the European Union, they will have to comply with European values, with the European requirements, which I think gives a head start to companies in Europe who want to develop similar solutions. So I'm not an expert in like those business and innovation aspects and the impact of the technology on competition, unfortunately, but I think that it's a bit more nuanced than people have been making it so far.
So we're going to jump online and see if there are a question there. And if not, I think we could potentially share the questions with you.
Thank you. I have a question from Siddhanta Kupcha, who's also interested in knowing something about the GDPR and AI interactions. And it's within medical GDPR data and whether you can use AI to utilize these data and these patient data.
AI Act GDPR interactions, I think, that's going to be like an important field of research coming up. I don't have an immediate answer to that question. I would say that the requirements of the GDPR will still apply, even if you're using them to develop any kind of AI solution. So you'll still have to respect patient confidentiality and privacy and like good practices in terms of data curation and filing and safety and so on. So like the short answer is yes.
Okay, thank you.
And are those the questions from online for now? Otherwise, I would advertise that you contact Léonard. The email is up here on the screen. And I think in order to respect time, we should thank you for now and welcome our next speakers.
Thank you very much.